Evan, a quick question for you and for all of you, by the way, please chime in on this. And I know it depends on the line of business, right? So each line of business is different, but are you guys seeing adjustments or tightening on the terms and conditions when it comes to, the actual, and has the pandemic done that, or is that just, in general, have you seen, from a conditions perspective?
It's definitely switched from a very much a buyer's market to very much a seller's market. So we're seeing the change in terms and conditions we're seeing are a lot more meaningful than even the rate increases in a lot of cases, which for us as a parametric provider creates a lot of opportunity. When coverage is removed, buyers and sophisticated advisors and brokers are looking for creative ways to add that back in. So we're absolutely seeing it. We're seeing deductibles raise, coverages that were there, not there. Around exposures, we're seeing exclusions put in, sub-limitations. Absolutely, from a terms and conditions standpoint, the market, in our view, is harder than it is from a premium standpoint.
Wow. Mamoon, how about you? What are you seeing from a terms and conditions perspective?
Yeah. So look, I'd step back and start by saying I think the insurance contract is a resilient one. It stood the test of time. And with time, claims make us all wiser, right? And we continue to improve that contract and improve, its effectiveness. And I think this is no different. I think here we need to sharpen the clarity and the intent. I mean, what we talk to our underwriters is, what you intend to cover, just make clear. And I think what needs to happen in general is just clarifying the coverage and making sure that when insureds need cash the most, if their business is interrupted and it's an insurable event at a time when their cash flows are interrupted, we can't have the system freeze into the courtrooms and take forever to adjudicate and then decide if there's a payment made at a time the guy's out of business. And so, we need just clarity on that and defining the intent more than is current. But we learn with these events. And I think generally speaking, though, as I look at some things and Dan brought up earlier, contingency covers, I think we will see pandemic exclusions when they're not meant to be covered will be more sharpened and included where they currently are not. But also kind of like Dan's analogy, we're problem solvers, right? At the end of the day, particularly on the reinsurance end of the spectrum, we're here to provide capacity and provide solutions and take on risk. We need, the buck stops here in a lot of ways. And so our intent, at Arch going forward, and I know our peers around us going into 1/1, is to try to solve problems, not create them. That's the only way I think the whole system gets more resilient.
Go ahead, Rohit.
I was just going to say, I applaud what Mamoon and Dan are saying, but I think what we're seeing is that there is a significant movement on terms and conditions and deductibles, even pre-pandemic, and obviously there's going to be an impact post-pandemic or while we're in the pandemic. Just look at the premium for the E&S carriers. That has gone up pretty significantly because the premium is moving out of the traditional U.S. admitted markets into the more E&S markets or moving towards Lloyd's. My concern is that you're going to see more significant chunks of uninsured assets. And there's always a difference between intent and outcome. Like I said, I applaud what Mamoon and Dan are saying about being attracted to the fire and being and underwriting. But the challenge is that line underwriter who's on the desk or the broker who's on the desk, what's happening is the terms and conditions are getting tighter and there is more uninsured risk that's out there. So that, to me, that is a bigger concern and something that we as an industry have to figure out a way to solve. Otherwise, it falls on federal and local authorities, and that causes other social issues which we're all aware of.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And somebody raised this. I think you raised the issue of can the clients afford it? And clearly, if you're a restaurant owner in New York and you're operating at 25% of capacity with a fraction of your staff, the last thing you want to see is a renewal on your CGL policy that's up 25%.
Right.
Interestingly enough, however, our clients are saying, for instance, one of our clients specializes in security guards. So you think, well, there's no events going on. So the security at concerts, that whole side of the business has fallen away. However, security at malls has gone up. Security, even if people aren't in office buildings, the security guards are sitting at the front desk. So it's kind of a best of times, worst of times, and maybe not surprisingly, on average, the overall portfolio is actually where they thought it was going to be. It's just moved in different directions. I mean, if you only specialized in promotions and special events as a security guard insurer, you're in trouble right now, or you have no revenue,
Right.
like being a contingency insurer. But if it's one of many areas, it averages out. Commercial auto is another one of those areas that people talk about all the time. And rate increase on rate increase on rate increase, hasn't really budged the operating results of the insurers in that space.
Right.
But that question's been asked: is can that trucking company support a $17,000 price when they were paying $4,000 a few years ago? I was looking at a survey, and insurance costs among truck companies isn't even on the top 5. It's finding drivers.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So it's intriguing that, and if you're, hey, our D&O renewal doubled, but at the end of the day, the board is not going to say don't buy D&O because it now costs one online rather than a half online.
Right.
Yeah. By the way, I mean, if you just think about the raw math of it, right, Dan, if you think about D&O, for example, the raw math and the challenge of it is as follows: 8 years of rate declines. An underwriter today is looking at pricing that's somewhere in the vicinity of 30 cents on the dollar for large commercial D&O. And that underwriter is facing plus 40% rate rises.
Right.
And that looks exceptionally interesting, right, and intriguing. But then you overlay the fact that now we're talking about interest rates in the U.S. that's 60 bips. You talk about the trend that's behind it. And frankly, you're facing an environment, a COVID environment, that without any civil protections in the U.S., you're facing claims made policy that you're kind of leaning into a potential lawsuit. So the dynamics are not obvious. I mean, the rating increases on the primary E&S side are steep, but it's coming from such a low place.
Right.
And it's not a a fish in the barrel kind of scenario. There are dynamics at play that make it so that one steps back from a 40% rate rise and says, I'm not sure that's enough.
Yeah.
And it just complicates the whole environment. And to Rohit's point earlier, for clients, this is not an easy thing to maneuver around. And for underwriters, it's not an easy thing to wrap your head around.
I mean, when you're selling a product to a huge corporation that's $4,000 a million, and you say, I've got a 20% increase. Like, yeah, right. You said it's probably, and then you say on a portfolio, that means I have to write, hundreds of those, and I can never have a loss to justify my existence.
Right. You are seeing, Dan, I don't know if you saw the news, that Virgin just fired their broker because I think a few weeks before their D&O renewal. Because of the price that was coming in, or because of whatever advice that the broker had given. I don't know the details. I just read it in the news, and I don't know who the broker is. But it was an interesting, development because nobody does that a few weeks before their D&O.
Well, I was at a panel a year ago, and I said our D&O renewal was a bit of a microcosm of the overall industry at the time because there was a change in the leads and a reshuffling of the stack, and pricing went up. And our broker quit halfway through because as a result of all these big corporate mergers, suddenly the guy who was working on it wasn't there anymore. And this is a bit of a theme right now as we have Aon and Willis, and having had Guy Carpenter and JLT. I mean, when the trusted advisors are the ones that are the people that are getting two parties to an agreement are on garden leave and are not able to participate in the process, and somebody who you've never heard of before suddenly steps in and says, don't worry, I'm just as good as Tom, Dick, Harry, or Jane, or whoever you were having. That as a client, you're really bearing the brunt of all this reformation of the industry.